in this first session, and we will have three speakers. It is the strategic resistance in Gaza. We start with the first speaker, Bilal Shalash. He is a historian in the University of Birzeit in Palestine. He is a researcher in a research center, and he is in charge of the group of Palestine in the Arabica. He is specialized in the military resistance of Palestinians. He has many studies, Nablus until the occupation. He has also a certain number of publications. In 2023, and the fighters of the occupied lands between June 67 and July 70, examples of liberation battle. Bilal. Thank you very much. Peace be upon you all. I thank our colleague Ayat for her presentation, and I thank the center for this invitation. As you see it in the screen, it is the first resistance which creates history. This title is taken from an opinion, رأينا, our opinion in Palestine, and from 1960, which summarizes the position of the Fatah organization as a front group which has to take in charge the resistance, and it was inspired by the experience in Algeria against occupation. Now there was October 2023, and with time passing there was a meeting for Al-Qassam, Muhammad Dif talking, say we can go forward and take the initiative so we can change the course of history, so we will have achieved that. This difference between the 67 and the actual experience which Gaza saw lately, between the two 67 and before that there was a long experience in the war, also the war of 47-48, and the frontiers war, if you can call them this way, and what the area witnessed before 67. After that there was a new experience, volume-wise and vision-wise, and also in the Arab world the position was different afterwards, and there was the Al-Karama battle, and this different vision of the Palestinian resistance, different from before 67. That first phase ends in 1982 when the resistance left Beirut, which was sort of the end of that experience. Of course, the resistance was continuing, but there was a transformation. Then the second era is the occupied land, and there was the Intifada, first and second Intifadas, and ending the Gaza wars, and of course this last one. So that second stage is between 67 until the last war in Gaza. The paper tries to talk at the first level about which what could call theoretical from the point of view that it is the smaller force, and this reflects the vision of the resistance to itself and to its capabilities in facing the colonial project of Israel. Before starting, the paper will talk in two dimensions in addition to the theoretical dimension. We will try to look at the practices about how to build force and how also to build allies, overseas allies, and also the different changing factors and the limited strength and means, military means. So this will lead to use innovative tactics. With regard to the short time, we have to do some introductions. We try to go back to the literature at the beginning of the resistance through some publications, and the new or the modern resistance, there is less possibility to reach the means. And after the signature of Oslo agreement, and knowing that the wars and battles marked the changes in different levels. We have here examples of some of the publications about the Palestinian role and the vision of the Palestinian resistance. This in 70, one of them, these publications on 1970, Abuamer, who was the responsible of the movement. This literature was related to September events, about the role of the Palestinians and what is the Arab role. Other literature also, they are internal, and nowadays we can consult them, and it is like a personal archive, and we can read them. This is about Fatah, some of the publications. As for the next stage, from 78 to the last Gaza war, it doesn't seem to be a main or major event which could be discussed theoretically. This last war maybe could maybe have an impact, and there could be studies and publications about that, because there was a conversion or a diversion in the vision and the difference between the situation in Gaza and the West Bank. But the discussion mainly remained internal. In fact, most of these texts are part of the activity or the resistance, and this activity, for many of those activities will not didn't lead to have publications, although it is continuous, and this is related to the security environment. We have a letter here from Ibrahim Hamad, who was a prisoner. He is one of the leaders of Hamas. He's talking about a text that he had written to overcome the stubbornness of geography, and it is not available now. For the first level, a theoretical one, and it seems that the time is running fast, most of literature of the Palestinian resistance, that the main objective is to free Palestine, and achieving this goal, although it seems very hard to achieve, but the resistance is continuing. You see here some of the sayings of Fatah and Abu Hammam of the Popular Front. It is trying to be the front head or the spearhead of resistance, which is saying that the Israeli occupation cannot be dealt with without a popular resistance, a long-term popular resistance. It is also suggesting that we should learn from the resistance, Algerian resistance and Vietnam and etc. This talking about a decisive battle is based on the fact that we are a weak force, and we need, like Fatah says in the 70s, in fact, it is forced to defend. If not, it would have choose an offensive approach. Fatah at that time is talking about the Arab role and the support of Arab countries, although it was also suggesting the non-intervention in the internal Arabic affairs. Because we cannot free Palestine if the surrounding countries are not willing to get into a military confrontation. We have here some of the discussions, so I am going faster. Many Palestinian organizations insist on the limits of the capacities of Palestinians. Palestinian revolution is part of the Arab revolution, and Palestine is in the forefront of this revolution, and the experience has proved that the conflict cannot be Palestinian-Israeli but Arab-Israeli. Talking also about the socialist camp and capitalist camp. So the vision is that the means of the Palestinians are limited, and there is a necessity for an Arab role. And there are limits for a Palestinian to be involved in the internal situation in Arab countries. Only 2 minutes remaining. For the second part, it is about the practices. I will talk about some tactical operational aspects in conducting its operation, and which is varying time-wise and location-wise. We can talk about from 1967 to the back forces in Jordan, and also external operations. You have here a text about this type of operations, which were used to overcome or to prove that or to deal with the idea that we are weak. There are two other models. So the confrontation is critical because there was no possibility for training under occupation. Finally, later on, about the suicide operations, where the person is the explosive. So these were some ways of the overcome the geographical constraints. Other tactics came on after, and our colleague will detail them. Thank you, Bilal, for this addition. The second, Mr. Mahmoud Muhareb, he is a researcher. He is a doctorate from Reading in the UK. He has dozens of publications about Zionism and Israel, the nuclear policy of Israel in 2013, secret relations between the Jewish agency during the crisis. So mentioning a certain number of publications of Mr. Muhareb, Doctor. Thank you, Dr. Ariad. The subject is the reserve forces in the Israeli military, their regression in number and in quality. Israel says that their fighting force is based on the reserves, which have always to stay in state of readiness, so they can be called upon as fast as possible. And their role in the wars conducted by Israel in 56, 67, and 73 and 82. Then it studies the regression of these forces in number, and it is called less and less. So this led to reduce its readiness for fighting, which impacted their role in this last war, this genocidal war of Israel. Israeli military have three categories: compulsory recruited, then this military is called the regular forces. Then the reserves, who are reserve forces when they finish their compulsory period, And this period was 1 month at least, a whole month at least. And this is for training and keeping the fighting capacities. And Ben Gurion tried to recruit the highest number of soldiers through the military, the popular military, which is relies on a small regular military, and the military in December 48 reached 108,000 soldiers. With the increase of migration of Jews to Israel, the reserve forces reached 210,000 and 243,000. Now it is only 400,000, while Israeli population is 7 million now. This reserved forces represented the main force in the wars of 67, 73 and the Lebanon war against the LPO. In June 67, around 264,000, 214,000 were from the reserves, and and the reservists represented the majority of the military. 7 battalions, and after 1973, the Israelis increased their number, especially the reserves, because there was a shock for the theory of Israel security, and 14 battalions, and they played an important role in the first Lebanon war, or war against Lebanon, and the 7 battalions were used. Most of them were among the reservists. Now we call about the reduction of the number of those reservists. Since the 80s or 90s, to reduce these forces, and among the reasons for that, the causes of that, the economic crisis and the difficulty for the economy to support the expenses of these forces, because the nature of wars has also changed. Then because there were less dangers, especially after Israel signed the peace agreement with Egypt, and also the agreement of Oslo with Jordan, and the Arab countries abandoned the military option to recover the Palestinian occupied territories. And then Israel started dealing with military groups. These wars didn't need a big army, but they decided to transform the military into a small and smart military through developing the air force, and to develop also the military intelligence, and using later on the artificial intelligence about the information to the military groups who are facing Israel. This also required the consolidation of the regular military and provide them with the necessary weaponry so that it can coordinate with the Air Force in facing the threats and dangers that Israel is facing. These factors led to the regression of the relying on these reserve forces, and with regard to the increase of the Israeli population, only 6% are registered in the reserves. And the battalions also was reduced to seven battalions. Most of them are from the reserves. Also, the proportion or the percentage of compulsory recruitment in the military reduced. When they reach the age of being recruited, in 1990, the Jewish men who were not recruited reached 16%. In 2020, this percentage rose to 33%. For the women, the proportion was 38% in 1990, then 44% in 2020. This, of course, led to reducing the number of reserves. Since 1985, the call upon the reserves forces to participate to the trainings, and this was due to the cost of such operations and also the economic environment or conditions. And the number of days was 10 million days in 1985, was reduced to 4 million days of training in 2017. Since the mid-80s, the age of recruitment went from 54 years to 45 years. The military reserves law mentions that the military should call upon them 18 days per year for military training. The military didn't stick to that. In 2014, for example, the military didn't call 60% of those who are registered as reserves. In 2016, 6% only of the reserve forces attended those trainings. For the Air Force reserves, the Air Force plays an important role. Its annual budget reaches half of the military budget for the whole army. The number is 38,000 and the reserves are 55,000. And the reserves military in the Air Force is different from the other parts of the military. There are two categories: the pilots who are in the compulsory service and the pilots who signed a contract. Then the pilots in the reserves who represent the main force of the Air Force, and they stand out by the fact that they work 1 day per week during the whole year in order to keep the readiness to operate and to train the others. And during the other 6 days of the week, they work in their civil work, and they get a salary, monthly salary for working, attending 1 day per week. The military reserve, the Israeli experts say that the reserve forces were not ready enough to participate in the war with regard to their preparedness, their training, etc., against Hamas and the Palestinian resistance groups. The military reached many weeks to organize the reserves and train them before to send them and to participate, before to start its land attack on Gaza. Israel could start a war in Egypt and Syria, but it couldn't. It started against Gaza, and after a long time, it launched an attack against Lebanon. And they were in the north of Israel. In this war, killed around 49,000 Palestinians. Most of them are women and children, and also injured more than 110,000, and destroyed most of the civilian towns and cities, and although all these crimes committed by Israel in Gaza, it couldn't achieve the goals that they are announced for the war, which is ending the ruling of Hamas and destroying its military capacities. So they couldn't achieve the victory according to their criteria, in the which they defined before this war. A short war with a low cost and with high efficiency. On the contrary, this war was very long, with high losses relatively, and also no achievements, no full achievements. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Mahmoud, and for your commitment to the time. Majd Abuamer, now a colleague, he is a researcher and coordinating role in the Arab Center. He has masters in political sciences from the Doha Center for Higher Studies. He focuses on the democratic and also to the Palestinian studies. He has a number of his publications, To Be or Not to Be, The Hamas Dilemma and International Law and Community. Good morning, and thank you for this presentation. I'm happy to be part of this session. I will try to continue what a friend Bilal said. So how does Hamas, or how do Hamas defend? And try to answer the main question. while the genocidal war, the most violent war of Israel, how could the resistance resist in an asymmetric war? I start from four considerations. First of all, this is not a document for the events of the war, and also is not mentioning all the actions, but to observe the paradigm of the actions. And also this paper has nothing to do with victory or defeat, because it is not a war between two parties, and also it is not to praise the action of the resistance. And the importance for me is to understand a war which could be a strategic lesson in modern war, and I think it is necessary to insist on the fact that it is Hamas is not a military, is not an army, and it in fact it succeeded because it is not an army. Three axes put the war in the frame of the Israeli war against Gaza. Then briefly, the infrastructure of the Palestinian resistance, especially the tunnels and the military manufacturing. Since 2003 until 2023, Israeli forces conducted 23 military operations, and the Gaza Strip is the objective. And the most important of them is after Hamas took the control of the band of the strip. So there was 1.7 wars per year, and I like to insist on this aspect. The main objective of these wars from 2003 to today was to destroy the military capacities of the military groups, and to respond to any action, Palestinian action. In the war 2008-2009, it was a surprise for the military, for the Palestinian resistance, the rhythm of the war and the all-round shelling and the attack against the ramp, satellite launching ramp. So they were convinced that there should be a strategy to develop a new way in next, which took 8 days. Everybody could see the impact of the launch of missiles by Palestinians. Then in 2014, for 51 days, and it was the most violent before the last war, and the Israeli entered from different points, and also the use of drones for the first time, in addition to using new missiles. But the main change in 2014, in one day, the 7th of July 2014, resistance conducted 6 intervention, and there was a direct confrontation in 4 of them. After the end of 2014, it was clear the importance of the using the tunnels, and then everybody was talking about this network of tunnels. So with regard to the experience of the previous wars and the Israeli way of conducting them, the military groups try to develop their systems learning from the previous wars. After 2014, Israel knew that the tunnel network is very important, and two military Israeli military said we didn't see any of the fighters of Hamas that we faced. It's like they are ghosts. And after 2014, 2021, Israel pretended that it destroyed 100 kilometers of the tunnels. So the military strategy of Hamas was after that directed pushing or forcing Israel to face the military, the land operations. After 2014 and the tunnels network were developed with various entries and issues, and with equipping them with communication capabilities, etc. In addition to that, the tunnels were secured strategically, so there were metallic or iron gates which prevent the deflagration of explosions when attacked. So there were attacking tunnels, defensive tunnels, and there were different types of tunnels. And sometimes one of the tunnels could have different or hybrid roles. And also some of the tunnels, if they are damaged, they can be rehabilitated quickly. Before 2023, the length of the tunnels were estimated at 500 kilometers. After the war, and Israel says that it could be 560 kilometers, and with different also depth. Then the Hamas also increased its military fabrication efforts with different types of missiles or of cannons, and also Schwaz explosives and drones, different types of drones, and military weapons like torpedo al-Asif. For the tactical fighting in this war, and there were some analysis of the military operations. Three parts according to the tactics. There is the attack which is on various points on the 7th of October. This is the first in kind, which is called Tufan al-Aqsa, the flood of al-Aqsa. And it uncovered the failure of the defensive policy of Israel. But we can say that Al-Qassam used all the means that it has developed, direct confrontation, missiles, long and short range, and naval and land capacities. It doesn't seem to be main objective, but the resistance tried to achieve whatever could be achieved. From the 7th to the 26th of October, after it came back to defense, it relied on the long-range missiles, where while Israel was shelling air attacks, and also some of the infiltration in occupied territories, and there was exchange also. The Al-Qassam had two infiltrations, naval infiltrations. The third period started with the start of the land attack. This stage started with use the urban war and with the tunnels network, and the urban war and the tunnels war. It managed to resist or to stand to the some of the attacks, and there was small groups are conducting infiltration, moving through the tunnels to reach the zero distance where they face the Israeli forces. This war and these fighting tactics proved their efficiency, because it reduces the capabilities of the Israeli military, because the fighters in Al-Qassam or in Al-Quds, they go out and they attack the military machineries and go back from the same tunnel or to another tunnel in continuous operation. Militarily, Hamas was ready to the reaction of Israel, or it was one of the eventual scenarios. And the type of weapons they have, the short explosive or the missiles, and also the possibility of land attack. And the plans are the same in 2008, 2014. I think that Hamas didn't expect the Israeli reaction with this amplitude, and this affected. And if they were not suspecting it, they wouldn't have achieved some success in facing the Israelis. So they showed some efficiency, and they managed to have infiltrations in fortified positions, and also it increased the cost for the Israelis. Strategically, with this asymmetric confrontation, there is no possibility to defeat such an operation according to the traditional concept. And Hamas relatively succeeded, although there is no political result.
Finally, I collected the data, and I'm trying or working on the analysis in a way to come with more accurate conclusions. I welcome any feedback. Thank you. Thank you, Majd. Now from Palestine to Lebanon and the support front for Gaza with Dr. Bashir Saade, who is a professor at Sterling University, and he got his PhD from King's College, and he formerly worked with Edinburgh University and the American University in Beirut. And his research focus is on political Islam and the media and war studies, Hezbollah and the politics of remembrance. And Dr. Bashir, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, and thank you to the. I'll be speaking in English.
And repeat, actually, thank you very much for inviting me to this conference. I would like to start by saying that I am not a military expert in any way. I do follow a little bit how the military impacts on the things I'm interested in, which what I'm going to talk about today. But I would hope to learn more. I'm actually already learning a lot from the session this morning and today, the discussions that happen. And I hope to make some points, interesting points about how other things like culture and ideas and impacts and politics impacts on military outcomes in one way or another. And that's why actually my discussion today is to consider or to explore the notion of resilience that Hezbollah as or what is called the Islamic resistance in Lebanon has exhibited in the last year or so of events taking place in Lebanon since obviously the October 7 attack and the Gaza war that followed, and how Hezbollah as an actor in Lebanon also intervened to help in a sense, or to achieve a certain military balance that we can discuss later. But what I will try to emphasize today is to explain why I think we could look at other factors than just purely military ones, or at least on the technologically military ones, and look at how culture actually matters a lot in seeing how acts of resistance work. And I guess this maybe also applies to Hamas to a certain extent. But okay, so basically, actually, one thing to start with is that I'm actually giving this talk now, and at the same time today in Lebanon, there's a huge procession and coming together of people from all over the world, and also from Lebanon, to commemorate the assassination of the Secretary General of Hezbollah, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. You probably heard of him, and also the man who was going to succeed him, who was Sayyid Hisham Sadfiaddin. And so just the organization of this, I was thinking how the organization of this event in Lebanon already is a witness of the extent to which Hezbollah is still working in a certain way, in an efficient manner, in bringing people from all over the place and conducting. There's like 100,000 or 200,000 people actually flocking from Lebanon, from different areas of Lebanon, while actually at the same time today the Israelis were bombing the south of Lebanon and are continuing certain targeted attacks. I mean, quote unquote targeted, but still targeting since the ceasefire was signed a few months ago. Israel has continued targeting, which shows that somewhere there's something about this this resistance that bothers Israel, or at least that seems that Israel is still trying to achieve certain goals that I'm going to come back to in a little bit. So, yes, in the face of the military superiority of the Israeli army, or the technology that was exposed to us in the last year or so, how and the various setbacks that actually Hezbollah has suffered, that I will slightly describe today, how come can we talk of a resilience, or are we talking? So the language today about this topic is that it's either Hezbollah has been defeated, or for those who are maybe on the other side say, no, on the contrary, there was a victory. And I think, just to echo what Majd was saying, is that maybe it's not a question of defeat or victory, but more a question of some kind of transformation or some kind of dynamic that took place. I mean, Hezbollah is still there. It has suffered setbacks, but it's still there. Just to give you some context on my work and how I will apply it to what I'm saying. So back in 2016, so now it's a while ago, I've published a book on Hezbollah, and my point in the book, my main emphasis was to discuss how Hezbollah exhibits a certain form of ideology that tells us something about how ideology works in political science. So how we study ideology, usually like different ideologies like liberalism, conservatism, Marxism, and all that. There's all sorts of theories that we make about what we call ideology. And my point was to say that Hezbollah actually has shows or demonstrates a different kind of thinking about what we call ideology. And what I meant by this is that maybe ideology is something in the making, is something that is built over time and is never really filled into something clear and coherent. It's something that gets built up by experience and by, for me at least in this case, a certain use of the past. So a certain use of past events and a certain use of not just event, but a way people have done certain things, a certain use of deeds, and so in a sense a tradition of doing. So it's a bit tautological in a sense. It's a kind of circular thing, but you are what you've done in a sense. So the political organization, usually we think of political organizations as having a certain doctrine or a certain worldview. Of course, we do have all sorts of ideas of how the world works, and that is usually called ideology. But what I was trying to show in this book is that Hezbollah built this over time, rather than started with something fixed. And the way it built this is through its own legacy. And its own legacy was mainly based on martyrdom. So this is one of the main things, but there's other things also as well. And so the martyrs, or the people who were dying on the battlefield, or dying for the cause of fighting occupation, was really the crux of the matter. I'm going to show now how martyrdom actually has a very practical, a practical implication to this question of resilience. It may sound a bit paradoxical because martyrdom means that actually people are dying and so they don't exist anymore. So how is this a victory? But we're going to see how this works. But one of the things also I was interested in is the fact that Hezbollah always, through its construction of its own past and through the people who gave for the cause, also developed into a fully fledged organization, and ended up having always had an ambiguous relationship with the state in place. And I think one of the issues with the why Hezbollah always had an ambiguous relation with the Lebanese state, it's not just because it's a non-state actor, this kind of classical relationship between non-state actors and state actors, but because also the state, in the case of Lebanon, was very weak and very fragmented. And so, in a sense, the state was a blessing and a curse So a lot of the talk around Hezbollah involves thinking, oh, is Hezbollah trying to take over the state, or is Hezbollah not interested in the state at all? So in the first part of the emergence of the organization up until the mid-90s, maybe early 90s, seemingly Hezbollah was not interested in engaging with the political environment. And then after this, it seemed to be, it is at least more and more engaging. And the main idea is to say that Hezbollah is better off not engaging, or I mean, the main debate was whether it's better off engaging or not engaging. And I think one of the main issues is that whatever happened, Hezbollah was stuck with this thing called the State of Lebanon, and for better or for worse, as a blessing or a curse, it had to deal with it. And it was probably one of the reasons why Hezbollah remained a bit constrained in its operation. So just quickly, a rundown of the organization, a quick history for those. Probably most of you are very familiar with this, but just in case people are not, I'm going to go fast. Hezbollah is really born out of Israeli occupation of south of Lebanon. It's an organization that just emerged after the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982 that reached Beirut, dislodged the PLO main leadership, and then retreated, but kept a certain occupation of the south of Lebanon. Hezbollah starts as a different groups coalescing together, different militants coming from various organizations, and fights Israel up until 2000, when there is a more significant Israeli withdrawal of most of the territories of south of Lebanon. What I'm trying to show here, just because I don't have much time, is that Hezbollah has always been plagued with wars and security problems. If you look at the date, 2000, there's an Israeli withdrawal. 2005, actually I forgot to put the date here, the Prime Minister Hariri is assassinated. The same year, the Syrian, that were basically the main security structure in Lebanon, withdrew from Lebanon. So Hezbollah is faced with a big security vacuum there. July 2006, even before 2006, there's a few mini small wars inside Lebanon, but July 2006 happened with Israel attacks Lebanon after Hezbollah captures Israeli soldiers and trying to free some prisoners, and there's a full-scale war. 2008, 2009, there's also mini coups and all sorts of events taking place. 2012, they intervene in Syria, and obviously now we have Gaza in 2023, and a bunch of other things happened before. But so my point is that how come? So in a sense, Hezbollah has always been an organization that has faced a wartime situation. It's always been at loggerheads with either institutions in place from inside that were challenging its legitimacy or its cause, or from outside, meaning the U.S., Israel, or whoever. So we're in 2023. In 2023, after Israel succeeds in attacking several military. So it succeeds in assassinating several military commanders in Hezbollah, and then there's the famous pager attack that you may have heard of, where Israel had rigged thousands of pagers that were used by the military, the Hezbollah as an organization, but also by other people in Lebanon. And so we end up having almost 4,000 people hit by the pager attack, either killed or maimed, and so after this happened and the assassination of its Secretary General, Israel starts a more full-scale attack against Lebanon. So this is what I was gonna try to discuss, but I basically don't have time much, and I should have structured myself a little bit, Ned. Huh? 2 minutes. Yeah, 2 minutes, I know. So I'm just gonna give you some points. Until the end of until the ceasefire was signed, basically, Hezbollah was, so Israel had actually effectively killed most of the top leadership of Hezbollah, and had the pager attack has sent a huge shockwave in the organization functioning. And yet, until that ceasefire was signed, Hezbollah was still firing rockets into Israel, and basically doing mainly what these resistance organizations do, which is to create that security problem to Israel. And so, what I'm trying to say is that even in the face of so much loss, actually the organization continued operating. It continued in a very systematic manner. And one way this happened is, I think, because of this key notion of martyrdom. Because actually, the organization is structured in a way that, as people die, it is considered in some kind of, in a way, some kind of a victory. There's either people who are there to replace them, or there's a certain way. The death of the fighters and the leadership come as an inspiration for other people to wait to face this. The whole notion of fighting for Hezbollah is based on the notion of dying for the cause, because it is linked to the tradition of to a certain understanding of their past. That starts from the martyrdom of the grandson of the Prophet all the way to today, but with also the contemporary leadership having all been killed, from the first Secretary General, second Secretary General of Hezbollah, to clerics before him who were an inspiring figure of Hezbollah, to up until the present Secretary General. Yeah, so I'm going to stop here. I actually wanted to develop this point a little bit more, but I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now we open the floor for questions. Amjad from Palestine. I want to ask from Majd, I think I asked the same question last year at the Arab Center on the Tufan al-Aqsa. Is Hamas really, in a political sense, thinks that it has a strategy? And by this I mean in the political sense, not military tactics. Does Hamas think that it wants to achieve certain aims or objectives? In my personal opinion, I think Hamas is achieving a moral victory, which is important, no less. But how can this moral victory be translated into military gains or even political victories? Hamas gets something out of the exchange of prisoners, for example, but it's at the same time maybe undermining the cause of the two-state solution. So has Hamas in this war really managed to disrupt the strategies of everyone else, even if they themselves do not have a strategy? And does the situation in Gaza require a different approach? I cannot see Gaza as a purely military thing or a tactical thing. It's something unique which needs to be studied in a different light altogether.
I have a question for the last speaker, Bashir. Let us do a thought experiment. Let us say that in southern part of Lebanon, there is no such community called Shia. It is made up of some community called X. would you expect same kind of martyrdom given the context of a weak state? That's a current, by definition, having a state, the first task of a state is geography, protection of geography, and the utter failure of this entity of protecting its own geography being violated so brazenly with the 1982 invasion and the dictation by another country, and given also the dynamics of the wider Middle East, given the confrontation, given the yearning, the current context. So what I'm trying to really deconstruct is that you are building that martyrdom by appealing to some historical past rather than the current context and the challenges of building a state. Either we have a state or we don't have a state. That is the question. And within that question, there is certain dynamics that could arise. Thank you.
شكرا.
Thank you. Undoubtedly, the papers, I apologize, I could not hear them all, especially Dr. Mahmoud, but I agree with him through reading the executive summary. The conference's title is Tactical Adaptations and Operational Innovations. I, in fact, wanted to hear something else apart from the Hezbollah or the operational or the weakness in their infantry fighting branch. I have written about this, and for example, the Israeli army, because of the weakness of their infantry branch, they developed other capabilities. I wanted some sort of a situation report. What happened to Hezbollah? What's this due to a defect in recognizing that the infantry force was weak and cannot fight on more than one front, or wasn't this battle a trap designed to drag Iran into a wider conflict? The same thing applies to Hamas. Undoubtedly, the Al-Aqsa flood and their steadfastness is something which deserves to be taught at military academies. But was it right that the Palestinian nationalist movement was right to move from strategic defense to strategic attack? Well,
can we in 2025 still call Hezbollah the resistance movement? Both in terms of the scope, in terms of the methods used, in terms of the numbers, in terms of the equipment, in terms of the ideology and the goals. Is it not that we are still using the political notion of resistance that was good in the very beginning, when like not going to the old history of the movement, but for 2025 de facto we are both undermining what does really mean resistance and other groups around the world, and at the same time not analyzing the Hezbollah as the proper group, but still thinking about them as just the civilian resistance group. Doesn't matter violent or non-violent, but still resistance is first of all with the emphasis on the civilian component.
Hello, Cynthia from Latvia. Thank you very much for all of your presentations. I was also thinking something in the lines what just colleague mentioned, but more towards ideological perspective of Hamas and Hezbollah, and through the perspective that is very widely being discussed in Europe, where I'm coming from. Basically, we are calling these organizations terrorist organizations. What do you make of that when it comes to analyzing through ideological perspective? And the presentation title for the final presentation was Islamic resistance. Can you explain how that, where's the line, where you draw the line on radical Islam and extremism being developing, and how we can comply them with the resistance movements that you have been discussing today, and also what would be your suggestions towards the Western societies? Are we looking towards those movements and missing something, or understanding something wrong in that regard? Thank you.
رح ناخذ آخر سؤالين وبنكمل.
Take two questions, Sophie and Ahmed, last two questions. Good morning to you all. I have one general observation regarding the description of Hamas and Hezbollah. It's not up to researchers to provide definitions to Western countries or societies. This is not our job. Secondly, I'm not an expert on security studies, I'm an anthropologist. I hear two concepts. One is martyrdom or shahada, and the second, I'm a bit nervous, I forgot the second. From the last two presentations, there is something in these wars which are like national liberation wars, when there's para-strategic, para-technical. I wanted to know how important is this. The doctor called it ideological, or some call it cultural, and these wars, which are based on the idea of people who are fighting for their land, for their culture, for their values, for their honor. And thank you again. Ahmed Bassouni, last question. Good afternoon. This is a question to Majd Abuamer. Thank you all presenters. In an interview we held with one of the people who took part in the 7th of October attack, and he said the most feared weapon in Hamas's possession is the tunnels, and this were not used as much. We used what is above the ground, like some aerial vehicles, like gliders, etc. To what extent is Hamas trying to adapt to Israeli citizens? How does the use of tunnels in the 7th of October attacks reflect the strategy or not? Thank you very much. I'll come back now to the panelists. Most questions were to Mr. Bashir.
في سؤال عن the gentleman at the back, do you expect a similar resistance to emerge if there was no, whoever was in this house, whether Shia or whatever? Yeah, of course. I mean, occupation produced some form of resistance. My only point is to explain that, and there were many resistances already in Lebanon. There were many resistance groups, in the early 80s, even in the 70s, because Israel was already in 76, also a little bit, and in 78, and also the PLO, fought from the south of Lebanon since the 60s, if I'm not wrong on that date. So and yeah. I think I'm not saying that the resistance has a particularity, which is that it should be either Shia or something like this. I think resistance, every people will articulate their resistance in terms of how they feel they belong to a certain community. That's why we have things like nationalism, or we have, somebody was talking about nationalism also, and things like this. These are ways of thinking of who do I belong to, and yes, what is my past lineage? This is why I'm interested in the past and past lineage, because the way I perceive myself produces a certain form of social consciousness that I'm part of this community, and I need to fight back. I don't know if I'm answering your question. The other question is about the war. About the logistical side of things, like did Hezbollah miscalculate, or were they wrong in doing certain things in a way? How did they think deterrence work? So I have my own opinion on this, but I think this needs to be studied. I think this is something that needs a lot of time to understand. Something incredible happened in the last year all over the region, and understanding the various powers at play from the international to the regional and to the local is I think everything was involved. The Americans, the Iranians, the region, the Gulf, and I think Hezbollah is not Superman, and and yeah, I think maybe they have miscalculated in one way or another. And again, I'm not an expert on this, but maybe they have thought that Israel will behave in a certain way, and I think something was changed. First, the technological advancement, the fact that they had so much information, the fact that also I think it wasn't just the AI and all that, but also there were very clear political decisions that this time were going all the way. And I think maybe Hezbollah thought they're not going to go all the way. That they will. There is no green light to really let Israel go and start killing everybody, and yet there was. So at some point, something happened like that. Sorry.
So we will continue during the break.
Oh yeah,
Is that
okay.
possible? Because we need to give more
of
time
course,
for
yeah,
other speakers.
Should I? Okay. Okay. Should I stop?
Yeah, thank you. So Majd, we will follow the order.
طيب شكرا على الأسئلة.
Thank you for the question, for the interaction. Does Hamas have a strategy? I think that if the objective was to free the Palestinian prisoners, I think it would be an exaggerated action. If the objective is to free Palestine, it will be a very small operation. So maybe the Hamas didn't expect the Israeli to have a reaction of this scale. We wish that some of the Hamas movement was there who could have told us or spoke to us about this. I think that they were expecting this is an unprecedented action, the one that Hamas did or conducted in the 7th of October, and the armed resistance of Palestinians. We can notice that there is a lack of strategic, but Hamas seems to have committed repetitively some of the mistakes committed before. After 67, or the discourse of Hamas after Tufan al-Aqsa was the same after 73. They say that they created the hope or strengthen the hope of Arabs in a win. That it has the public opinion. It's exactly what Hamas said after the 7th of October. I don't think that the beliefs of Hamas are not different. So I noticed that there are mistakes which are repeated. Mr. Bassiouni, what was surprising in the 7th of October is moving from a defensive position to an attacking one. And there was also, Israel was over relying on technology, and it proved that they were expecting the attack from tunnels, but it was on the surface, and so the calculations were not military. It was like a miracle. Dr. Mahmoud, it's important to the building of the Israeli military and the latest changes because there is an attack which kills tens of thousands. It is the Israeli military. In the last 3 decades, there was a change, important change in building the military force in Israel. They reduced the land forces and they focused on the forces which serve the interest of Israel, the Air Force, the drones, the intelligence, the AI. All these things that the doctor talked about, and gathering information and data about countries and using them in fighting the non-state groups. This is the main change which happened in Israel. 2 things come from that. First of all, for Gaza and for South Lebanon. It won't be a war. It's not a traditional war. It is a genocidal war because Israel doesn't have the infantry or the military that could go and fight from street fights. They have Air Force and they just shell and destroy. In the past, wars were not this way. You get into a city and you do the mapping up and clean up, if you can say that. Today, any war of Israel is a genocidal war. Therefore, when we talk about reducing the land forces, this is how to build for Israel to build their forces in a way that serves their interests. So they have the nuclear power, they have the Air Force supremacy, but it proves in their way of building force is hitting and continuously around the clock everyone in the non-state groups. As for the performance of the resistance in Gaza, it is a legendary resistance, of course, whether it is the people or the fighters. You cannot find a similar example in history. Nearly 50,000 killed and 110,000 injured. So it will be a real problem how to rebuild the Gaza Strip. As for Hezbollah, it is not martyrdom. I studied the policy of Israel towards Hezbollah. Israel prepared everything possible to start a war against Hezbollah, to conduct a war against, how to infiltrate individually or mentally. Hezbollah conducted a war before 2006. They were not ready. Israel conducted its main operation in Gaza, and then it has all the time to focus on Hezbollah. So Hezbollah was not prepared, and the image that we had about the strength of Hezbollah, and they make Israel pay a high price, we didn't see it in the field. Thank you. We reached the end of this session. Thank you for the panelists. The next session will start at 12:45. Thank you.